Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts, Nashville State Senator Thelma Harper, Clint Brewer, editor of the Nashville City Paper, and News 2's contributing political analyst Steve Gill. I guess the first big test of President Obama was this week in the House when the stimulus package came up for a vote. It got approval, but it didn't win any Republican votes, and some Democrats also voted against it because of tack-ons. Is this the first real test of his leadership, this whole stimulus bill?
First off, thanks for inviting me and calling me an expert. I think this is the first test, but there's nothing abnormal about the holdouts. Now, we were a little bit concerned about our holdout from Davidson County, but there's nothing abnormal about it. I mean, I think you can understand when you talk about the tack-ons, you know, what are we doing, giving warm milk to cows or whatever, those kind of things. But we're in serious trouble. I think the strong suits of it is we stand an opportunity to get some educational money right here in Davidson County. That's important, and in Tennessee. But I think all of the other, it's unconscionable that legislators, congressional legislators, would tack on things that would serve as a demerit when our economy is in such a desperate state.
I think it's a test. I don't think it's a huge test. I mean, the Democrats in both chambers of Congress are not going to defect in large numbers like Jim Cooper did here. Jim Cooper had very good reasons for doing so, though. This bill, about half of the money, if not a little less, is going towards the purposes that Americans actually think it's going to go to, like infrastructure and creating new jobs. There's a lot of nonsense in this bill, and Jim Cooper was right to vote against it. Our newspaper thanked him for voting against it. But it being a challenge for the president, I'm not so sure. He's got a lot of support, and the economy's bad, and people are desperate.
I think it just exposes why Congress has a 14% approval rating, and it's not a test of Barack Obama. It's a test of Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid that they have, I think, as Congressman Cooper pointed out, taken advantage of a brand new president to load us this thing with Christmas lights and ornaments. As he pointed out, this bill is $350 billion in interest over the next 10 years alone on money we don't have in the bank. We're borrowing this money to spend on sod on the National Mall, on $400 million on sexually transmitted diseases programs, on smoking cessation. There is a lot of junk in this bill, and future generations of Americans shouldn't be paying for it.
Is it the system, or is it politicians in Washington not taking this crisis seriously and thinking it's okay to add these things on to what is an emergency spending bill?
Well, I think it's the spend-at-all-cost mentality that is the mentality that you have in Washington. You've not only got this $1 trillion bill, you've got another $1 trillion in economic stimulus that's gone to financial institutions and banks and everything else. You've got a $1 trillion tax hike looming when the Bush tax cuts go away next year. These guys are throwing money around like it's easy money, and they are putting this nation into a dangerous, dangerous position.
I think that many of those who are elected officials, they're not on the ground and they're not in touch with their constituents. If they were, they would listen to the job cuts that come out every week, 1,000, 5,000 here. They're not in touch. They're not in touch with small businesses. They're not in touch with the average person who husband and wife both have lost a job. Otherwise, this would be taken seriously. It's serious out here. Look at our state.
You and I reporting every day, more companies laying off people, closing down. It is serious out there, and I think there's agreement on both sides of the aisle, whether it's this bill or something. Something has to happen to prop this economy up.
Something has to happen, and I do think that the folks in Congress take the problem seriously. I think that the culture up there is so ingrained that they can't help themselves. I mean, they just cannot stop themselves from tacking this stuff on. And if the stimulus doesn't work, you know, if it doesn't get where it needs to, the American people are going to be asking some really tough questions about, well, shouldn't we have used the rest of that money for these purposes?
And they're using the guise and the crisis of job loss, which is real, to put all this mess in here. For example, one piece of this stimulus package includes hundreds of millions of dollars going to the Coast Guard for acquisition and construction. Coast Guard does a lot of great work, but the stuff they've put into this program, they're justifying by saying it'll create jobs. But the jobs they're going to create with the money they're spending comes out to $460,000 per job. We need to create jobs, but we need to do it the right way.
You know, one of the things that I hope the Justice Department will do, I hope they'll follow the money trail to determine who spent it and how, and if they spent it in the way that they promised. I think that there's no real commitment to assure that a person doesn't buy a commode that costs $85,000. I mean, what can you do on a commode that would warrant that much?
Do we really want to know?
No, but
I think it's half that.
I think it's really serious
Sure.
that there should be some kind of tracking of where that money is going, and it should be used for its intended purpose. Obviously, when you're given those kind of bonuses, look how many people that would put back to work.
And this bill is important to every state. Governor
Yes,
Bredesen
it
is
is.
considering delaying his State of the State address to see if and when this passes, because it means so much money to the state education-wise.
Yes.
It may mean a difference between a 20% budget reduction and a 9% budget reduction.
It very well may, and you know, there's going to be money coming back here for infrastructure. I know that the State Department of Transportation is
Yes.
preparing for some money. I know the Department of Education is preparing for some money. So we will feel it here. I just think we could have felt it a lot more.
But that's where part of the problem is. People are saying, oh, we're going to get some free money from Washington. This bill is going to cost the average American family $10,000 because that's the credit cost, that's the cost of borrowing it. You know, it's not free money. Generations of Tennesseans are going to be paying a lot of interest for this money.
I don't think they think it's free, because we know that's our money, and Washington gets their money from us, from the states. We send it up there, and they send us back what they want us to have. So it's not free. We're paying for it.
One proposal that didn't happen, two congressmen here, Zach Wamp and Lincoln Davis, wanted about $25 million to clean up the ash spill in East Tennessee so that it wasn't passed along to ratepayers. Good idea, but is this the right bill to get that money?
Again, there's a lot of stuff that's in this bill that may make some sense, but if it's a good idea, it ought to be able to stand on its own, not tuck it into a bill by saying, you know, this is for the children or this is for an economic crisis, this is going to put people back to work. We need to find ways, and we know ways that are proven, by cutting taxes, by putting money back into the hands of the American consumer. That's what's going to grow the economy, not spending it 3 years from now.
I do think that that money should have gone to clean that up, because our rates as ratepayers, we're paying, it's already escalated. We have people now who can't pay their electric bills. So I think if it's going to be used to help those people who were so damaged, I think that's a good use for it.
Here locally, the state legislature, the House Ethics Committee, took up the allegations against Speaker Kent Williams and decided that the Ethics Committee was not the place for this discussion. I may be wrong, but it seems like that would be the place for this discussion. Anyway, this is a serious issue down there that still just seems to turn, and not be resolved.
Their legal counsel told them that that was not the place. And I trust the legal advice. It's unfortunate that 2 years later that we're having to address that issue. And anytime there's an accusation made about sexual harassment, it should be investigated thoroughly, because sometimes what happens is there's a tendency to say, to point to the victim. Now, I don't know all of the circumstances, but I think when there's a charge made, something should happen immediately, not 2 years later.
Well, and now we have the added complication of State Representative Kelsey's text messages to the new speaker about their political rivalry and about how it possibly could be solved by committee chairmanship. You know, or at least that's the suggestion. So, you know, I think what you're watching here, the sexual harassment issue aside, the state Republican House caucus is in meltdown. I mean, it's just like watching a car wreck. And, you know, that hearing was a lot of egg on the face for Representative Kelsey. You know, you would think it would be needed to be heard in an ethics committee, except it was 2 years old and it wasn't acted on by leadership then. So, you know, I think that their leadership needs to get control of their caucus.
I think there's plenty of egg to go around on Capitol Hill. Gary Odom, Mike Turner, former Speaker Nafee. It's a veritable, you know, omelet up there these days, and all these guys need to get back to the business of Tennessee and solving the serious problems we have and stop throwing egg at each other.
Steve Gill, Clint Brewer, State Senator Thelma Harper, thank you for your insight. Stay with us. This week continues in a moment.